Ms. Fee, I wanted to ask, when will the Secretary complete the legal review of atrocity designation in regards to Ethiopia? We've been waiting for months.
We have decided to refrain at the current...
You think you're tuning in to watch a congresswoman hold the State Department accountable? But what you're actually seeing is the difference between performing for social media and actually doing the job. Ilhan Omar tried to pin Molly Fee to the wall on Africa relations, clearly hoping for that perfect gotcha moment. But instead of backing down, Fee delivered a calm, detailed response that turned the moment into a lesson on how foreign policy discussions are supposed to work. So, stick around. We're going to break down the full clip, because moments like this show the difference between political theater and serious governance, and why many Americans are paying closer attention to how these exchanges actually play out. Let's get into it.
I wanted to ask, when will the Secretary complete the legal review of atrocity designation in regards to Ethiopia? We've been waiting for months.
As I have discussed here today, our primary focus has been on trying to engage diplomatically in the many ways that are available to us to reach an end to the conflict, which would obviously result in an immediate end of the atrocities. And so we have decided to refrain at the current moment from making a public determination in order to allow space and time to see if the talks that are currently underway can make progress. But I want you to know that we have undergone an active and dynamic determination process. It's ongoing as we continue to assess emerging reports of human rights violations and abuses, and we remain committed to seeing what we can do to address the current elements that have caused all of us such concern. Mm-hmm. We have also engaged Facebook and Twitter. I've spoken here today to ask the diaspora to consider how it discusses the situation. And we are quite concerned as well by hate speech by the government and other elites in Ethiopia. And I think we need to call on everyone to do better to address that situation.
Thank you. There's also increasing reports that the United Arab Emirates, Turkey, China, Iran are arming the Ethiopian government with drones and other weapons. Isn't it time to be pushing for an arms embargo? And in the meantime, shouldn't we be pushing our allies to stop arming Abiy's government?
Absolutely. The issue of arms supplies to Ethiopia is a component of our diplomacy with regional and international allies, and the issue of an arms embargo is one of the many elements of the discussion taking place in New York in the Security Council.
There's also mass migration that is happening in Ethiopia. Millions of people have been displaced. It's contributing to the crisis that's taking place in Sudan. We obviously are seeing many of these migrants enter Libya that are being brutalized. We're also seeing what's happening in Europe as some of them are facing heart conditions as they try to enter the border of some of those the European countries. What is the U.S. involvement in trying to mitigate this situation and provide humanitarian assistance?
The subject of Ethiopia has been a subject of immense focus and concern since the Biden-Harris administration took office. In the early months of the administration, they appointed Jeff Feltman as envoy. We continue to be active in Addis with other parties to the conflict who we can reach outside of Addis. As I mentioned before, we're working with the African Union. We're trying to support President Obasanjo. We're working with Kenya and other influential partners in Africa. We're working in the Security Council, at the Human Rights Council. We work with our like-minded partners in Europe. There is a real sustained effort to try and arrest this conflict because of the devastating consequences that you've just described in your intervention.
And I hope those efforts are being handled with the urgency that it deserves. I believe Ethiopia is too big to fail, and it's the possibility of it destabilizing the whole region just breaks my heart. Speaking of the East African region, we know that Somalia has failed to have elections for over a year now. That conflict is happening. What is the U.S. position on trying to pressure the Somali government to engage in a process that allows for proper elections to take place?
So we agree with you absolutely that the elections are critical, first to complete the parliamentary elections so that the stage is set to move to the presidential elections. That is a component of our engagement with the government, all parties in Somalia, and with all the many regional and international actors who are also active in Somalia, so that there's a unified message. We're also looking now, as you know, the AMISOM mandate is about to expire, and we're looking at how that mandate can be reconfigured to support both the political process and the fight against al-Shabaab. So there is no neglect of that situation. It remains tough to convince the parties to move in the right direction. There has been some progress in the parliamentary elections, but there needs to be more, and it needs to be done more quickly to help Somalia get on a path to self-sufficiency. So that is an area of active discussion, again, with Somali leaders and with our partners in the African Union and in Europe who are financing part of the AMISOM conflict.
And to my colleague's point earlier with the carrot and stick, what mechanisms are we utilizing to make sure that Somalia understands what our position is in regards to this and takes the proper course?
I think one of the lessons that we learned from Afghanistan, that I personally learned and that Secretary Blinken learned, doing more of the same is not necessarily sufficient. So there's a real effort to make clear to the Somalis that they cannot depend indefinitely on international assistance and that they need to play a role in leading and managing their own country. So that is a spirit that is infusing our approach.
Okay, let's take a breath because there's a lot to unpack here. But the headline is pretty simple. One person in that room is chasing headlines, and the other is focused on diplomacy. Did you notice how Ilhan Omar opened the exchange? Right away, she zeroes in on the atrocity designation. She keeps pressing the question, when will the legal review be finished? Her tone is impatient. She points out that people have been waiting for months. Now watch Molly Fee. She doesn't take the bait. Instead, she calmly explains that the State Department isn't just sitting back doing nothing. The reason they're holding off on a public determination is to leave space for negotiations. That's what diplomacy often looks like behind the scenes. Omar clearly wants a label she can point to publicly. Fee, on the other hand, is focused on reducing the fighting. Publicly declaring everything an atrocity in the middle of negotiations can complicate talks and harden positions. Fee understands that dynamic, which is why she stays measured and careful with her words. Then the conversation shifts to the arms embargo. Omar starts listing countries, UAE, Turkey, China, Iran, arguing that outside actors are fueling the conflict. She pushes for the United States to take a stronger stance. Again, watch Fee's response. She stays composed. No finger-pointing, no dramatic language. She simply notes that arms flows are already part of ongoing diplomatic discussions and work at the United Nations. It's a restrained answer, but a deliberate one. And finally, the discussion turns to Somalia. Omar raises concerns about the lack of elections and asks what pressure the U.S. is applying. Fee responds by pointing to lessons learned from war in Afghanistan, 2001 to 2021. Her point is that lasting political progress has to come from Somali leaders themselves. International partners can support and encourage reforms, but ultimately a country's leadership must take responsibility for its own political system. So what you see in this exchange is a clear contrast in styles. Omar presses aggressively on several policy fronts. Fee answers in the language of diplomacy, measured, cautious, and focused on long-term strategy rather than immediate declarations. Moments like this show how complicated foreign policy debates can be. They are rarely as simple as a single label or headline. What do you think about the exchange? Was Fee appropriately cautious, or should the U.S. be more direct in situations like this?